Fantastic
Yeah.
stuff. And obviously you had success with Argent and things like that. And Hold Your Head Up was a huge hit, wasn't it? Top 5 in the UK and US and Canada. I mean, that was fantastic. But despite that success, you've spoken in the past about how hard you found things kind of at that time period. And you've spoken about the depression and things that you suffered at the time. And looking back, how hard was it for you? Because it wasn't the sort of time where men spoke about that or people spoke about anything like that, was it at all?
I always did, Paul. I always did.
Okay.
I always talked about it. It never bothered me. It never bothered me to talk about it. And it does help people. I know that. But, when you think you're going to die every day, then you don't mind what you say to people, what you actually say or whatever. And it doesn't make any difference. You become stronger once you've had depression. But it was mainly, when I look back now, I was trying to write songs. I was trying to be in a band, Argent. We had a deal where I was writing some songs for the band. Rod was writing songs for the band. Chris White was writing songs for the band. And we were gigging in between. So I'm a lark. I get up very early every day, and I always have done, and I still do. I used to get up. I lived with my mum and dad like in 1968. And I used to get up at 8 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and I used to write every day. So I'd write from 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, like 4 or 5 hours. I'd write. I loved it. So, I used to do it. But the problem was when Argent were also on the road, they'd turn up after 5 hours or 4 or 5 hours writing. They'd turn up in the car with the driver, and I jump into the car. Then we drive to Manchester, Liverpool, or we go to Birmingham, Coventry, Wolverhampton, Aston, anywhere those places, and we do gigs. And so, we'd play Manchester University, Birmingham, or in these sort of university towns. We get home at 3 o'clock in the morning, 3:30 in the morning. I go to bed. I'd be up at 7 o'clock writing. And the same thing would happen the next day, be in the car again. I did it for 2 years. Basically, it was exhaustion. It was not getting the right food on the road and becoming anemic, exhausted, basically, and being dehydrated most of the time. And so that's what happens, you become, they used to call it in the media, becoming emotionally exhausted, I think it used to be called then. And that's what happened to me. I never cancelled a show. And, but you walk around in a daze, because I never experienced anything like depression before. It was new to me. But it's great coming out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's so great because you realize you can survive it and you come out the other end. You can come out the other end, just hang in. Sometimes you need medication. Some people don't need medication, but it's good to have medication. You get out the other end. And then, as I've said before, sky is bluer, trees are greener, and life is better. It's wonderful.
There is always a way, and there's always someone to speak to, and I'm so glad to hear that you were able to speak about it at the time as well, because it is difficult for anybody.
Yeah, it was difficult for men then.
Yeah,
but I've always been kind of okay with myself. As far as my masculinity is concerned, I'm okay with it. Yeah. And it's just one of those things, can happen. You read about footballers having depression, cricketers having depression, rugby players having depression. And that's okay. That's okay. If you can come out of it, it enhances your life. It adds to your life, And I think that's the songwriting, especially. Because if you can actually identify with this depressive side of yourself, it can turn into some good songs, I wrote I Don't Believe in Miracles for Colin.
Yes.
Not for Colin, but I wrote it for myself because I explain in that song exactly how I was feeling. When I wrote I Don't Believe in Miracles, I put my head on the keys and just put my head on the keys and cried, And then everyone after said, "Oh, it's a wonderful song. That's an amazing song, because I think they feel what went into it."
Absolutely. And I
It
read on your
wasn't.
website as well, one of the first songs you wrote when you came out of depression was God Gave Rock and Roll to You. And does that hold a dear place in your heart then, given the place that it was written from?
Yeah, yeah. That's exactly right. I wrote "Don't Believe in Miracles" going into it, and I was writing other stuff in between. But I wrote "God Gave" coming out of it 9 months later. 9 months later, I guess, maybe longer than that. Actually, it might be longer than that. It does hold. It holds a place in my heart because I think my mother gave me the idea for the title
All
because
right.
not for that song. She didn't give me the idea for it, but she used to say that a lot, you know. Oh, God gave him that. Oh, God gave him that. God gave him that talent to do that. Talking about other people. Oh, yeah, but that's God given, isn't it? That's God given, and that kind of stuff, you know. And I'm thinking, I think to myself, God gave rock and roll to you. But if this energy out there gave anything, everything to the world, which obviously, if it is, I don't know, the universe or whatever, or what entity it is, then that entity also gave rock and roll to us indirectly or directly.
Very true, very true. And obviously Kiss later had a huge hit with that song as well, and famously credited themselves as writers of it. I mean, how did you feel about that?
I was okay with it. In fact, they changed the first verse, which did make more sense than mine. I was trying to be funny in mine, to be honest. I was trying to love your friend. You're too young to remember Cliff Richard. Cliff Richard made us a #1 single years ago, #1 single called Please Don't Tease. And my lyric went, love your friend, love your neighbor, love your life, love your labor. It's never too late to change your mind. Don't step on snails, don't climb in trees. Love Cliff Richard, but please don't tease. You know, that was meant to be funny, you know, but Kiss came up with the first verse of sort of guitars, get it in tune, and you go out there and you play, which made more sense to Americans, obviously. And I was told it was going to be in a movie anyway. Mm-hmm. I was told years before, 2 years before, that they wanted it for a Bill and Ted film. And I was speaking to somebody in America who said he saw me waiting to go into an office, a record company office. And he said, "Are you Russ Ballard?" And I recognized this guy. He was the bass player in Blondie. He was Nigel Harrison.
Yes.
He was in Blondie, a tall, curly hair guy. "You Russ Ballard?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm collating songs." He said, "Have you heard of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures?" So they made a movie called Excellent Adventures. I said, "I've heard of it." He said, "Well, I was saying, to the director and the people that your song, God Gave Rock and Roll to You, would be a great song for this part in the film, the next film." He said, "It's perfect. It'd be perfect for this scene." And then they tried a few different groups playing it, recording it, and it ended up with KISS. And that's how they came to change. They had to change the lyric. I could have changed the lyric, but they wanted to change the lyric to the first verse, which is fair enough.
Absolutely. And by that point, obviously, you had connections with KISS because of like Ace Frehley and Peter Criss as well and things like that. So it was an interesting dynamic that KISS took that song on as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. I think Peter Criss did a couple. Ace Frehley did too. He did In the Night and New York Groove. So I mean, they've been sort of champions for me. There's been a few champions for me out there, to be honest.
So there should be.
Yeah.
And you mentioned New York Groove there. I mean, is it the famous story that you wrote that the inspiration came when you were flying on a jet over to New York? Was that correct?
Yeah. I produced an album for Roger Daltrey in 1975. And that took about 6 months to do, which is a long time. But, we were getting the songs together and stuff. Roger went on holiday for 2 months. So anyway, when it was finished, we had it mastered in London. It was mastered at the the mastering room in London, and it didn't seem as loud as an album as other albums I was listening to. Then I spoke to a few different people, and they said the best place to get a rock album mastered is to go to Sterling Sound in New York and get it mastered by Bill Ludwig, who's a great master apparently. So I went over there for a couple of days and left it with Bill Ludwig. But as I got on the plane, I did think of New York Groove. I thought, I'm back in the New York Groove. That's exactly what I thought. And I thought, that's a good title for a song. I wrote it down, put it in a notebook. And when it came to actually writing, and I wrote it in the studio with the band there, and in a demo studio. This was a band called Hello who recorded it first. They were 16 years old, had all their equipment set up, and they started to play. And I said, look, do this in E. I have a harmonica. It's in B, so it will play in an E. So play this in E. Do you know Bo Diddley? And they kind of said, what do you mean Bo Diddley? Right? Gotcha, 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 gotcha. And they started to play this. And I said, right, I want the feeling of stamp. That's how it started. And then we just went into it. Took about an hour to write the song. I wrote the lyrics. I'm showing E, B, A. Then we needed a bit in the middle, and I said, I don't know what to do here. So I wrote, must be one of the first raps actually. Here I am again in the city, with a fistful of dollars. And baby, you better believe I'm back. Back in the New York groove. And that's how it came about. And I think, being a very quick tune and being a little bit inspired, it did have an energy to it, I think.
And when was the first that you heard that Ace was going to release it? Because obviously he put it on his solo record when the four guys went and did their solo things, didn't he? And it became a big hit for him.
They all did solo projects. That was 78. That was 3 years later, amazingly. That always happens to my songs. They always come out 3 or 4, 5 years after I've recorded them. Yeah.
And when was the first you heard of it? I mean, did you just kind of turn it on, or did you?
I was in New York, and I was at April Music Publishing. It's funny, no one's ever asked me this before. I remember being there. A guy called George, I'm trying to think of his second name, an older man, it was to me then. He said, Ace Frehley's recorded New York Groove. I said, yeah, I know. He said, why didn't you do it? I said, because I wrote it for a young band that my brother found, and it was a hit. That was a hit big hit in Germany, and a hit here in England, obviously in Scotland as well. That's when I first heard about it, actually.